In this chapter, we're going to see how to change the content of web pages depending on specific conditions. For example, you might want to show different content depending on which day or month it is, or if a person is logged in, or if a form has been submitted. Before doing so, we need to look at how PHP makes decisions. If you're familiar with conditional statements in JavaScript, you'll find that PHP works almost identically. Even if you're not familiar with JavaScript, you'll be glad to know that decision-making is based on human language. The basic structure of a conditional statement in PHP looks like this. The keyword if is followed by a condition wrapped in parentheses. Conditions are often based on comparisons, such as whether two values are equal or one is greater than the other. If that condition is true, all the code between the pair of curly braces will be executed. If the condition is not true, PHP skips over all the code inside the curly braces and it carries on with whatever follows. You can specify an alternative course of action by adding the else keyword after the closing curly brace, with different code in a second pair of braces. So if the condition fails, the second block of code is executed. But you're not limited to a case of either or. You can also specify further conditions using else if. In PHP, else if is normally spelled as one word, unlike JavaScript, where else and if must be two separate words. You can also use two separate words in PHP, but spelling else if as a single word is more common. In theory, there's no limit to the number of else if blocks you can use. PHP checks each condition in turn and executes the code in the first block where the condition is true. Only one block of code is ever executed, even if later conditions are also true. As mentioned earlier, conditions are frequently based on comparing two values. This table shows the main comparison operators. As in JavaScript, two equals signs are used to check if two values are the same, and an exclamation mark followed by an equals sign means not equal. The other four comparison operators, greater than or equal to, less than, and less than or equal to, are widely used in other contexts, so they should be familiar to you. You're not limited to single conditions. To combine two or more conditions, two ampersands between each condition mean and. If you use and, each condition must be true. Two vertical pipes mean or. PHP stops checking as soon as it encounters a condition that's true. Finally, an exclamation mark placed before a condition reverses its meaning. So something that's true becomes not true, in other words, false. And something that's false becomes not false, in other words, true. So that's how PHP makes decisions. The condition is wrapped in a pair of parentheses after if, else, or else if. If the condition is true, the code between the following pair of curly braces is executed. If it's false, the code is ignored. That's the theory. You're now ready to start putting it into practice. Let's experiment with PHP if-else structures to display different output depending on the current time. Later in this chapter, we'll apply the same techniques to the Hansel and Petal website, but this exercise concentrates on the code and control structures used. This page contains several paragraphs with greetings for different times of the day. What we need to do is to use PHP decision-making structures to display the correct greeting. We also want to display the current day and the time in the 24-hour clock. Now, PHP has an extremely useful function called date that gets the current date and time from the web server, and you can use it to generate different output, such as the day of the week or the hour, by passing it a format string as an argument. And even though I've been using PHP for years, I still find it difficult to remember all the formatting characters. So let's go to the PHP online documentation and look at the documentation for the date function. And if we scroll down, there's a list of the format characters with description and examples. So if you use a lowercase d, that gives you the day of the month, 2 digits with leading zeros, 01 through to 31. What we want is Sunday through Saturday. That's a full textual representation of the day of the week. So it's a lowercase l that we need as our format character. And we also want the time. And if we look down here, uppercase H is the 24-hour format of an hour with leading zeros, and lowercase I is minutes with leading zeros. So let's get back to work with our new knowledge. Need to put a PHP block above the doc type. And we're going to create 3 variables to store those details. So the first one will be day, and its date, and the format string, it's a string so it must be in quotes, is lowercase l. And then the time is date, and then the format string is uppercase H, and then a colon. You can put in literal characters as long as they're not already formatting characters, and a colon is not. So this will appear as a colon between the hour and the minutes. The minutes is lowercase I. Close that string. And then finally we want to have the hour. And we'll do date. And the format string is uppercase H. There we are. We've got those variables ready. We can now display them in the page. So scroll down, and in this paragraph here, we'll add a PHP block. Echo day. And for the time, another PHP block. So let's save that page and test it in a browser. And the address will be localhost /exercises /chapter 03 03_02/ and then the name of the file, which was date_parts.php. And there we are. Today is Tuesday, and the time is now 15:07. Now, don't worry if you get warning about time zones or the time is wrong. We'll deal with that later in the chapter. What we need to deal with now is making sure that we get the correct greeting displayed. We've got 4 greetings here at the moment. It's 15:07, in other words, just gone 3 o'clock in the afternoon, so we want to display good afternoon. So let's get back to work with our code. And before good morning, we need to insert a PHP code block with an if statement. And the condition will be hour greater than 5, or that's 2 vertical pipes, and we need to repeat hour, and it will be less than 12. Then an opening curly brace, and I'm going to close the PHP block here. A lot of people think that if you're using an if-else structure, all the code between the braces need to be written in PHP. That's not the case. You can in fact have plain HTML between the opening and closing braces. And in fact, it's more efficient to do it that way than converting all the HTML into a string and using echo or print. And this also avoids the need to escape any quotation marks in the HTML. So let's go down underneath that paragraph. We can add in a new PHP block and then put in the closing curly brace there. And what we need to do is to have our else if statement. So writing else if as all one word. And then the hour needs to be greater than or equal to 12. Or the hour needs to be less than 18. Opening curly brace, and then close that PHP block. Move down underneath good afternoon. Another PHP block. Close that curly brace. Another else if. I'm using else if all as one word. You can split it into 2, but using one word is more normal in PHP. So for the evening, we need the condition hour is greater than or equal to 18, or hour is less than 23. Another opening brace, close that off, and then underneath here, another PHP block, closing curly brace, and we don't need to have another condition because if it's not any of those previous conditions, it's going to be late at night. So just else here, that opening curly brace, close that off, and of course we need to finish off at the end with a closing curly brace. And that goes, of course, inside a PHP block. So there we are. No syntax errors. We can save the page, go back to our browser. The time, of course, will be different when I reload the page because it's getting it from the server. There we are. The time is now 15:11, 11 minutes past 3 in the afternoon. Oh dear. It says good morning. Why has that happened? Well, in some respects, it was a deliberate mistake, and it's a very common mistake for people to make. If the hour is greater than 5, then that will be true. So the hour is greater than 5, it's 15. The fact that it's less than 12 doesn't make any difference, because what happens when you use or is only one of them needs to be true. So in fact, all of these are wrong. We need to use a double ampersand to make it and. So both sides of the condition need to be true, or both parts of the condition need to be true. There we are, we've changed all those. Save the page again, go back to our browser. Time's now 15:12. Good afternoon. Success. So this has been only a simple example of using if-else to control output in PHP, but it's demonstrated several important points. First of all, we got several different date parts of the current date and time using the date function and formatting characters. Then lower down in the page, we used if, else if, and else to build a conditional structure. Each condition used comparison operators, and each block used a multiple condition. The original script used or in each conditional block, but that resulted in the first condition never failing. And it wasn't until we changed it to and that both parts of the condition were checked. Choosing between and or isn't always as simple as it first seems. And the final important point is that the code between the curly braces of an if-else structure doesn't necessarily have to be PHP. You can also have just HTML or a mixture of HTML and PHP. We've already met the PHP date function, which can be used to get different date and time parts. It's just one of an extensive range of date and time related functions. They all depend on the time set on your web server, and for them to work correctly, the PHP engine needs to know which time zone it's using. And you can also change the time zone. There are two reasons you might want to do so. The first is if you have a situation like this page here. A whole series of ugly messages saying that it's not safe to rely on the system's time zone settings. The time zone needs to be set either in the PHP configuration or by using a special function. And if we look at the time down here at the bottom, it says the local time is now 23:19 on Tuesday. Well, I often do work late, but it's not actually as late as that. What has happened is that PHP has selected the time zone as being UTC, Universal Coordinated Time, which is the same as GMT. Actually, although I come from London, I'm currently in California, so although it's the afternoon on Tuesday, it's certainly not that late at night. So the other reason you might want to change the time zone is if your server is in a different time zone from you. For example, I'm normally based in London, UK, but my web server is in Chicago. So the time's not only wrong, but the UK and the United States switch between daylight saving and standard time on different dates. And PHP is fully aware of daylight saving. So before you can change the time zone, you need to look up the correct value for your part of the world. So let's go back to the PHP documentation. And there's a link at the bottom here for a list of supported time zones. They're all organized according to continents. So if we look at America, you can see that the format is America / and then normally it's the name of a city, but sometimes it's the name of a country and a city. For example, America / Argentina / Buenos _Aires. So it's not the United States of America, it's the Americas. So it covers North, Central and South America. And in fact, if you're in Hawaii, you're not in America as far as PHP is concerned, you're in the Pacific and your correct time zone would be Pacific/Honolulu. Ideally, you should set the time zone in the PHP configuration file php.ini. The location of this file depends on your setup, and you may not be able to change it if you're on shared hosting. Now, I'm using a local testing server. I'm on Windows, I'm using XAMPP, so I'll show you how to change it on XAMPP. Let me just go to my Finder, and there we are in XAMPP on the C disk, and it's in PHP folder. And if we have scroll down, there it is, php.ini, right click and edit. And it opens it in the text editor. So find next, we will find time zone. It's spelt all as one word in PHP. Find next, that's not the one, that's not it either. There it is. What I've done is I've added a semicolon at the beginning of the line to deliberately comment out the time zone that has been set. So let me just remove that, and then we can cancel, save the file, and then go to Restart Apache. It's running again now. I can go back to my browser, reload that page. All of those nasty messages have gone, and it tells me that the local time is now 16:24. It's nearly 4:30 on a Tuesday afternoon. Now, I've just changed it in php.ini, but you may not be able to do that if you're on shared hosting. One way in which you can change it, if your hosting company allows you to change configuration settings using a .user.ini file, then you can create the same configuration setup as I've just done. Let's show you how to do that very quickly. Go into Dreamweaver and a new file. It needs to be a text file. Create that, and it's basically the same. It's date.timezone equals, and then it would be for California, America, /Los_Angeles. And then save that file. Normally you would save this in your server root, but I'm going to save it in the chapter 3 03_03 folder, and it is saved as .user.ini. This is a special configuration file that works only on certain servers. You need to check with your hosting company to see if this will work for you, and then just save that. Another way in which you can do it is if your server runs on Apache, you can create a .htaccess file. And the format for that is slightly different. So let's create that. New, it's also a text file. And the command is php_value, then a space, and it's date.timezone. That's the configuration directive. Then another space, and then in quotes it would be America /Los_Angeles. And you would save that as a .htaccess file. Normally you would save this in your site root and upload it to your site root. I'm going to put it in this particular folder, so it's .htaccess. And you'll be able to see these files in the download files. A warning for you if you're on a Mac. On a Mac, files that begin with a dot or a period at the beginning of the file name are hidden. You'll need to use a text editor that allows you to open hidden files. Alternatively, if you're using Dreamweaver, as you can see in the Files panel here, it is listed. Dreamweaver recognizes both .htaccess and .user.ini files. So, what if none of those options work for you, or if you want to change the time zone temporarily? You can set it in your PHP script using a function with an incredibly long name. Let me just go here in my PHP block at the top of the page, and what I'm going to do is change the time zone after I've already created those two variables using date. So the way in which you change the time zone is date_default_time zone, all as one word, _set. Oh yes, we're there. And then finally, you put in the time zone identifier. So let's imagine we're in Hawaii, those wonderful waves. So Pacific Honolulu. And this will temporarily change the time zone in this particular script. So I can now create a couple more variables for day underscore Hawaii, and then the date function. And we'll also have the time in Hawaii. And then finally, we'll put it in our HTML. Let's just copy that, paste it, and the local and the time in Hawaii is now, and that will be time underscore HI, and the day will be day underscore HI. We'll save that, and we'll go back to our browser, refresh it. The local time is now 16:31 in California, and in Hawaii it's 13:31. So there's quite a lot there about setting the time zone, but basically you should normally use a configuration file, php.ini or .user.ini or .htaccess to set the server's default time zone. Once you've done that, you can forget about it. But if you can't, you can always use date underscore default underscore time zone underscore set before using any date or time related function. And you can also use date default time zone set within a page to display the time or date in a different part of the world, as I've done just here. Let's try something a bit more ambitious and practical with our knowledge of the date function and PHP decision-making structures. We're going to create a copyright notice for the Hansel and Petal site that will automatically display the correct date range based on a start year and the current date. If we scroll down in the home page here, there's the copyright notice down in the footer. That's inside a server-side include that was created earlier in the course. So we need to go to that server-side include and start working. So here it is, footer.php, and if we scroll down, there is the copyright notice. It's hard-coded, copyright 2013 Hansel and Petal. And with the help of the date function and a bit of PHP logic, we'll be able to update this automatically at the stroke of midnight on New Year's Eve. Now, as you should know by now, the web server's time zone needs to be set before you can use the date function. If you set it in a configuration file, or if it's been set for you by your hosting company, you don't need to do anything. But if you can't use one of the configuration methods described earlier in this chapter, you need to use date default time zone set instead. Now, although we're working in the footer, you need to set the time zone, if necessary, in the other server-side include. In other words, in pagetop.php, because we'll be using the date function in other parts of the page later on in the course. So right at the top in the PHP code block, if you need to set the time zone here, this is where you should do it. So it will be date underscore default underscore time zone, all as one word, and then underscore set, and the argument needs to be a string containing the time zone identifier. For California, it would be America/Los underscore Angeles. Now, this is only necessary if you couldn't use one of the configuration methods. I don't need to use it. I'm just showing you where it should go. I'm going to comment out this line by putting a double slash at the beginning. So it'll be ignored by the server, but this is where you need to set it should you have the need to do so. So that's all we need to do in pagetop.php. So let's just save that page and then switch back to footer.php. And I'm going to put the code in a code block at the top of this server-side include. It's always a good idea to put code in a separate place where it's easy to see and easy to maintain. So let's put a little PHP code block up here. And the content of a website is normally built up over time, so it's usual to specify the copyright date as a range of years. So let's have a first variable, which will be the start year, and all one word, so we'll use camel case. Start year, capital Y for year, equals 2013. And then we need a variable for this year, so we'll call that this year, and use the date function. and a uppercase Y gives you the current year. Next, we need to find out if the current year is greater than the start year. So that's an if statement, and the condition will be if this year is greater than start year. Put those curly braces in there, and then inside those curly braces we'll create a new variable called copyright, and the copyright will use a double quoted string for this. It'll look a bit odd, but it will work, trust me. So double quotes, and then start year, then an ampersand, n dash, semicolon, that will give us a small dash, and then this year, and a closing double quote and a semicolon. And if this year is not greater than the start year, we need an else clause, so put those curly braces in there. If it's not greater than that, then copyright will be start year. So there's all the logic for creating the copyright notice up there. All we need to do is to add it in the copyright place. So we go down here, we find 2013, we delete that and replace it with a PHP code block, echo copyright, then close that block there. So if we save that and go back to the browser and reload the page, you can't see any difference because I'm recording this in 2013. So let's force a date range by changing the value of start year. Let's go back, scroll up to the top and make the start year 2011. Save that, go back to the browser, refresh it, and now we've got a date range of 2011 with an n dash between them, 2013. Now what if you want just the 2 digits, the 13 at the end there? No problem, let's go back to our code. We just need to make a slight change to the code, and then up here we need to change the value of this year equals, and then date. We're going to change the value. This time it'll be a lowercase y, and that gives you just the 2 digits for the date. Put a semicolon at the end, save that page, go back to the browser, reload it, and there we've got our date range as 2011 n-13. So there we have a simple yet practical use of the date function and an if-else structure. Your copyright notice will never be out of date again.